Hello everybody. Welcome back to the second tutorial in our three-part op-ed writing tutorial series. I am Stella and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and today we will be facilitating the tutorial on how to write a good op-ed. This is going to be the second session of our three-part series where we're covering writing for climate justice, how to write a good article, and how to edit and pitch your article to a publication. If you are watching this and you have not yet watched our first tutorial, we ask you to go back to the first session, writing for climate justice, before completing this one.
Yes, and just a little intro into who we are if you haven't seen our faces before. My name is Stella Hertantio and I am the Communications and Storytelling Coordinator at ACA.
And my name's Sarah Robin Farrell, and I am the Strategic Communications and Fundraising Manager. So Stella and I work together a lot.
Yes. And if you want to know a little bit more about ACA, we will leave the link to our website in the description. But just very briefly, we are a youth-led grassroots movement-based organization acting and advocating for Afrocentric climate justice. And at the heart of everything that we do is we are aiming to build accessible and inclusive socio-environmental literacy and capacity in young people to lead on climate justice initiatives in their own communities. And that is perfect for what we are doing with this series, which is really hoping to build capacity when it comes to writing and using our words to speak truth to power. So today we are going to be covering a few things in the second tutorial. Firstly, we'll be covering what is an op-ed. And we mentioned in the last tutorial that we'll really be getting into the nitty-gritty of that in this one. Then secondly, what are op-eds used for? Thirdly, what makes a good op-ed? And lastly, why you are the right person to write an op-ed. So a lot of this information is also in our ACA Activist Guide, which is a resource we created we launched it roughly a year ago. And it's a really great, you can download it as a digital copy from our website, and it includes many different chapters and resources on different ways to engage in climate activism, advocacy, and be a part of the climate justice movement in general. It's very much action-oriented, so we hope that you can implement it in your own lives. But yeah, if you haven't already got a copy, you can find that on our website. And we also encourage you to just take notes during the session. We think that taking notes is a great way to just start to absorb the information that you're hearing. And also, if you have any questions, you can note them down there and come back to us with them as well. So yeah, I'll pass to you, Sarah.
So let's look at what is an op-ed. So an op-ed is an article that's published on a media platform that is written by a member of the public rather than a journalist. That's not to say that journalists don't ever write op-eds. These days, they sometimes do. But what it is to say is that it's not necessarily someone who does writing for a living, but someone who just rather is using writing as a tool to communicate the need for change. So it's called an op-ed because in traditional newspapers, it was usually placed opposite the editorial page, which was a page that would feature letters to the editor from members of the public. And so the page opposite this page, where they would then publish these kind of more long form opinion editorials or op-eds. But now that's shifted a little bit. So that's more like the history of why they were called that. And they sometimes still are placed there, but now they are featured more in different places online and in print publications. And I think especially because of the online mediums that we have, you don't necessarily have a traditional newspaper all the time. And so things have shifted in that way. So it's a space for opinion and opportunity for issues or perspectives that might not make the mainstream news to be seen by a wide audience. Because as you can imagine, some of these publications have thousands or tens of thousands of readers, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of readers. And so, to maybe the news is not publishing about these issues that you're wanting to raise, but does give that opportunity. So what we see is that activists, members of civil society groups and organizations, or any member of the public can write op-eds about the issues that they feel the public needs to know about. They can be written by an individual or a collective. And I think that's important, that it does allow for multiple authors. So it doesn't, and it can also even be, said to come from an organization or a group. And so it doesn't necessarily only need to come from individuals. And unlike many other areas of public life, unlike many other areas of public life, I did say that, but the op-ed is usually not restricted by age. So it's an excellent place for youth activists to also have their say.
Yes, exactly. And as Sarah has said as well, op-ed writers usually draw on their lived experiences and subject matter expertise to help the reader connect the dots between events, issues, and broader social contexts that may not be covered in the news. So it's a really, really important storytelling medium for people to take these very, global issues or issues that are more systemic and humanize them. And we did touch on that in the first tutorial as well. So just to give you an example of what this might mean, for example, an op-ed might report on how large amounts of smoke from a factory are affecting children in the area. So the op-ed writer has more control over what is published than if their views were being reported by a journalist, because you as the writer are the one that has lived that experience. You have noticed how children are being affected. Perhaps you are even one of the people that has been affected by the smoke. So you have a very, very unique experience that is more grounded than in reality than whether a journalist came to you and asked you specific questions and then wrote your story essentially for you. So you can include any details that are commonly left out by mainstream news. And we often hear this critique of mainstream news that, it's very factual and the reporting is good, but it lacks that sense of humanity and of lived experience. So that's why op-eds play a very, very important part in how we understand the world and take action.
So looking at what makes a good op-ed, because obviously you will have lots of people that will try to get an op-ed published often, and there's limited space. And so it's not always a given that one can get an op-ed published. And just to say that when an op-ed doesn't get published, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad one. But sometimes the media might just be very busy with other, sometimes the news cycle is so full, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But just to say that writing a good one obviously increases your chances, but don't ever be discouraged if, you have to try again, because we've also, in our history of ACA, had many times where we haven't always had our op-eds published, and there are other ways that we can then use that content. But nonetheless, what makes a good op-ed? So importantly, an op-ed mustn't be too long. So we try to aim for around 750 to 800 words is a really nice sweet spot. It can be a little bit more. I've seen op-eds that kind of bridge the 1,000, 1,200 word area as well, sometimes a little bit less, but I think the 750 to 800 words is a really good amount of words, also to not lose people's attention if it's too long, and also just get your points across in a very succinct way. So importantly, your op-ed must have a very clearly defined topic or main argument. So an example that Stella used, how is air pollution affecting children in a particular area? That's very clearly defined topic. You know exactly what you're going to speak about. You have a main argument. So sometimes you might have a lot of things that you want to write about, and then it gives you the what's the word, like you tempted to want to pack it all into one piece. And I would rather suggest spreading it out and pulling it out and writing separate pieces so that your piece can be very focused. And that's why the article links the topic to a specific theme. So now, again, coming back to that example, environmental damage affects young people differently to how it affects adults. And these impacts are often unseen due to the experiences of adults being more dominant in the media. So we've taken that example of how air pollution is affecting children, and we're linking it to a broader theme of this specific issue of this factory to how generally environmental damage affects young people, and bringing in some of that information on a more general level and general theme. Then we can look at the article expressing a clear opinion on the topic and advocating for certain actions. So let's look at an example. Policymakers should acknowledge the social impacts of environmental damage that affect people or different ages in different ways, and policies should be adapted to reflect this awareness and provide children and caregivers support. So this looks at not only you've mentioned the topic, then you've linked it to a broader theme, then you have linked it to an opinion on what actions should be taken. So you're advocating for a certain action. So you see you're drawing those links. Importantly, it also must have a target audience in mind. So let's look at an example for this piece about a factory pollution and how it's affecting children. Who would your target audience be? Maybe it would be decision makers in municipal, provincial, or national government. Maybe also by reaching a wider audience, you would gather more support from people who could put pressure on those municipal and provincial and national governments. So it doesn't necessarily, if you're going to write an op-ed, it might not necessarily reach the government who you want, but maybe it will. Maybe you send it directly to them and you publish it online, and then you garner support from the public as well. So when you're thinking about your target audience, this affects your tone that you use when you write. It affects the angle that you use when you write. So from what perspective are you going to write it? And then bear in mind, though, that you want to make it very readable to a variety of people. And you can't always control how people read it. So trying to be very just clear in your language is very helpful. It doesn't, rather go for clear, simpler language than try to sound like, I really know what I'm talking about, and therefore I'm going to use all the synonyms that I can find to find the best words. The simpler is often the better, while still bearing in mind maybe a formal tone, for example, if you're trying to reach people in power.
Completely. And I think just to build on what Sarah has said, a few extra points, just to emphasize again, that the writing in an op-ed should be clear and to the point. Really don't try and bite off more than you can chew. Don't try and cover too many topics in one piece, because while it may feel to you that, there's so many points that you don't want to let go of and so many topics you want to bring in, to the reader, it dilutes the power of your message. So it's really a conversation of quality over quantity. You really want to make sure that you are driving home one very clear message with clear takeaways and calls to action, rather than trying to tackle so many different things at once, which is hard because so many things are connected, but just trying to return to that at every point and reflecting on it through your writing process. Then, this is super, super important, but your article needs to be backed up by thorough research, and you need to have checked your facts. So this means returning to many sources. If you're doing research on the internet, not just going for the first, report that you've seen, but checking, have other people spoken about this report? Are there other evidence, mediums for evidence that I can include? So false claims or exaggeration may negatively impact the cause and directly affect communities, which may have serious consequences. You can't make accusations against people unless you are 100% certain that they are absolutely true and it is in the public interest that this is known about. And this is really, really important, because if there are flaws in your research, or you are making accusations that aren't based 100% in truth, it basically means that people won't take your op-ed as seriously, because now they are very skeptical of what you're writing about. So in order for people to take your writing seriously and for your message to get across, and for the intended consequence of being able to build up the climate justice movement and have more people involved, you need to make sure that you are absolutely thorough in your research process. Then you need to make sure that the topic that you choose is one you know very well or relates to your lived experience. So if you're writing about other people's experiences, you need to make sure that they are fully in support of the article and have read and understood everything that you have written about before publishing. And this is just essential. Again, it's a part of our research. We don't want to be reporting falsely and misrepresenting people. The power of op-eds lies in drawing on the human experience and making points that speak to many different aspects of system change. So it is essential that if you are writing about something that doesn't affect you, you have considered and consulted people that it does affect. So yeah, just keep that in mind when choosing your topics. And then lastly, editing. Editing is such a crucial part of the op-ed process. It's as important as the writing stage. It's as important as research. You need to make sure that your piece is edited carefully and ask your collaborators to read your article and to check these points. So these are the 3 points that you need to check when editing. And we will be going more in depth in editing in the next tutorial, but these are just 3 points to keep in mind. So 1, does it make sense to an audience who may be new to the topic? Acronyms should be spelled out and some terms may need to be explained. You want somebody who is learning about this topic for the first time to not feel discouraged, not feel like they can't continue reading your article because you're using complicated words or you're using terms that aren't very commonly used in the public. So make sure that your article is as accessible as possible when it comes to language. Secondly, does it make clear sense for why this issue needs attention? So part of the power of an op-ed is making sure that the timing is correct. We spoke about this a little bit before, but it's important to perhaps time into a newsworthy event or something that people are thinking about at the time. Because, you know, it's all about grabbing people's attention and getting them to engage and to care more about the cause that you're speaking about. So it needs to be very, very clear right from the headline and the beginning of your article about why somebody should pay attention, take the time to read it, and then hopefully take action as well. And then lastly, you need to edit for grammar and spelling. This is just a really important part of the writing process because it helps with the flow of the article, it helps with how seriously people take you, and there are various tools that can help with that. One that I use quite a lot is called Grammarly. I will leave it in the bio or the description of the video as well. So I know that, if you're writing in a language that isn't your first language, grammar and spelling rules also change across countries and continents. So using a tool like Grammarly to help is really important to just finish off and put the cherry on top of your article before publishing and pitching.
Great. Thank you. So I think we're going to take a look just at a couple of examples, and we will post the link to these examples in the description as well. I'm going to share, and we won't go too in depth with these, but we do encourage you to take a look at them as examples and kind of compare them in terms of some of the things that we've spoken about. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
You are looking at the Going Green is Not Just a White Issue article.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is you see here, it says opinion, and that's usually how publications will define that it's an op-ed, it's part of the opinion section, and this will be across different ones. So here we have an example from Ground Up, a local South African publication, and where this author has spoken about the race and class politics of the environmental movement. And what they've done is they've taken this kind of theme, as we spoke about earlier, where you have a topic and a theme, and they've broadened that into looking at how environmental issues may sometimes still garner support, specifically like the conservation movement might garner support from more white financial groups, financially affluent groups. But however, it is the issue that the Black and poor South Africans are most affected by what he terms as dirty industrialism, or basically environmental injustice. And so from that, he would unpack this general theme into more broader aspects, stating opinions and facts to basically support that argument. And you will see this, it's again not very long, it's definitely under 1,000 words. And it comes to have the beginning where he states his topic. It goes into some of the different statements and facts that the author wants to bring across, and then ends it with a question. So we spoke earlier about, and I think in the previous tutorial as well, ending your article with a call to action or a question, something that's going to affect the reader, make them think. And in this question, in this article, he is basically asking a question, and really asking the audience to think. Another example here we have in The Guardian. Again, you see it is opinion and environment. And again, this showing that it is part of the opinion section. And this topic covers climate depression. So you'll start to see that with op-eds, often the titles are very descriptive. They're not too long, but they're very descriptive in terms of creating a reason for the person that's going to read through many different news articles, giving them a reason to click on it, and gives them an idea about exactly what the topic is about. So this person has stated climate depression is real and it is spreading fast among our youth, which very much gives us a clear sense of the fact that he's going to talk about climate depression, but he's also going to connect it to this theme of how it's impacting youth. And then again in the intro, so this is a very, very short intro. Sometimes intros can be longer, but in a sentence, he's also tried to state his opinion. His opinion is that the crisis can't be solved simply by positive messaging, and that it needs action from world leaders. So he's stating in that very, very short space of time exactly what his article is going to be about, what theme he's connecting it to, and what his call to action or what his opinion is in terms of what needs to happen as a result of him stating this. What you'll see here is that he writes it from a personal angle. So he says, if you're anything like me, you think of the climate emergency a lot. So that is often done. It doesn't have to be done, but it is a possible way of approaching an opinion piece where you draw on your own personal experience, things that have happened to you, things that you think. But again, be very careful that you're always linking it to fact and not getting too caught up in emotions and thoughts. So you'll see he starts with the fact that, you know, climate issues affect him and his psyche, his mind. And that's made him think about this, what he calls a growing epidemic of climate depression among young people. Again, just very much acknowledging both the previous article, this article. When we're talking about these issues, I think we're well aware that they are often difficult topics, real topics, and just, you know, encouraging that if any feelings come up, pause the video, come back to it. You know, we're not simply just using this as a purpose of analyzing it, but also, you know, these are real issues we want to bring to the fore. And so just acknowledging that. So here he's, as I said, stated his opinion, and then, but what he does go further to do in the body or the middle of his article, which is often really what you want to think about as the meat, you know, or, you know, for those who don't want to use meat analogies, tofu, but the, you know, the thick of it,
The main
really.
meal.
So, yes, the big meal, yeah. So it's where you're going to state your facts, okay? So he's stating his opinion, this broader thing, but here he's bringing it to, he uses an example of a survey, okay, where he's bringing in statistics. He uses example of where things are worsening. So he finds links to other publications where people have mentioned similar topics, and he links it. So these orange ones here are all links. And by linking out into these other issues, he's basically showing his facts, and he's showing that he's used research as the basis of his piece. And I think that that's something very important about his piece. And then again, his conclusion also just kind of really speaks about the kind of the overview of the piece, what has he touched on, and then again calling for what he wants as a result of making the statement, that call to action. So he's trying to, I think, in my opinion, not necessarily, while he's talking about world leaders and how they must orchestrate a rapid end to the fossil fuel industry for the sake of all and for young people. That's what he's saying. But what I think he's trying to do is actually get people to put pressure onto world leaders. So he's getting people to agree with him about the fact that it's the world leaders that need to make change so that they can then, so his call to action might, whilst he might be not mentioning the world leaders, he's actually trying to kind of garner that support. And I think another thing that is good with op-eds sometimes is that, you know, you must have a little bio for yourself ready that you can give to people and publications, just explaining who you are and why you are writing this. Another last example of a op-ed for today, we look at another South African publication, the Daily Maverick, and we look at how this piece is about COP. And again, quite a descriptive heading. We're seeing that trend, I think, across these pieces, that they are quite descriptive headings, but at the same time being clear and to the point. We'll see here links again, so linking into the research, backing up by research. In this case, the person who's writing this, the author that's writing this, will explain, you know, different used quotes. So here they've got quotes from people within the COP kind of ecosystem, and using that to also tell a story. So sometimes using the words of other people and weaving them into your story is also a way of backing up through research, because you found those quotes through research, and then you've brought them into your story, or you've maybe spoken about what publications have said. So here he's used quotes. In this paragraph over here that I'm highlighting, you can see he's mentioned a publication, The Guardian, which was the previous publication we were looking at. And he's also said, well, here's an example of something they've done. So he's clearly drawing from multiple sources, which is also something that really helps to back up research. So I'm seeing a lot of quote marks here. So there's a lot of use of quotes, a lot of use of what publications are saying, as I've said, to draw. Use of images. And then again, stating in the middle, again, starting to state those facts, those things. So saying, what does he think? He believes journalists have a particularly important role to play in the case of COP. And that's this. And then by stating that opinion, he then must go further to expand on that opinion and explain in a clear way what he's trying to say. Here, he is an interesting example. So I encourage you to read this, but I'm just pulling out like little pieces as an example where he speaks about 5 issues that he wants to add to this to COP and the important aspects that he's trying to bring across. And that is another way that I think it's important, where we're being very succinct. So the piece is long, but you're able to very clearly define the topics that you're trying to get across in a clear manner. Rather than kind of write lots of paragraphs about each of these issues, he's actually kind of stated them one after the other as points, and again, linked them out. Another thing that he's done here that is quite popular and can help break up your article is to make use of these kind of subheadings. And that also helps to organize. So what we've mentioned before is that organizing your information in your op-ed is really important to create that flow. And sometimes using these subheadings that he has done here can help break up the piece, and you see them again throughout the piece. So I think this example is an example of a bit of a longer op-ed. And so that's to show that, yes, while we've said aim for 750 to 850 words, it's not always a hard and fast rule. There are examples where there are longer ones, but I still, if you're going to go for a long piece, you must make sure that every word counts and that you're not just speaking a long piece for the sake of speaking a long piece. And it's actually because your facts need to be brought across and that's the only way. What I've also seen sometimes people do is actually, when the piece gets very long, break it up into a series of op-eds where you have op-ed 1, op-ed 2, op-ed 3 that kind of speak about these different pieces. So we'll put the links to those pieces in the description. And we just thought that it might be useful just to look at some of the trends that we're seeing across the different pieces, what's the same about them, what's different about them, what works. And maybe, you can also make up your own mind what doesn't work for you in those pieces. Just because we've used these examples doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that's stated in them or, how they are constructed.
Exactly, it's very true. And I think we wanted to have that balance between showing you 3 examples on different topics, different lengths, different publications, so you can see the similarities, but also the differences in approach. And there's many guidelines for how to write a good op-ed, but obviously each writer has their own flair. And at the end of the day, it's about how do we write most effectively to prompt action and to get our messages across. So you might have been wondering why while we've been going through these examples, okay, these people have attended COP, or they, have the person they're speaking about mental health is clearly a father who has experienced this with his children. But what makes you the right person to write an op-ed? Why have we convened this writing circle? Why are we, sharing these tutorials in the hopes that we will be writing op-eds together this year? And I'm going to share 5 points, but this is just to also say that each of our voices have power. It's not that these people are all academics or people that, sit high up in government or world leaders. But when it comes to op-eds, it's really about acknowledging that each of our lived experiences holds weight, holds power to shift narratives, to show those, world leaders and people on global stages and our governments that there's so much happening on the ground that they don't know about, and to call for action in those ways. So why are you the right person to write an op-ed or to contribute to writing an op-ed? So firstly, you are the right person because you care about issues affecting the environment and your community. And I think that's something that we all have in common. Otherwise, we would not be here, be part of ACA. It's just a big part of who we are. Secondly, you have, or through research will have, a well-informed perspective on the topics you want to write about. And as we mentioned earlier, that is a combination of lived experience and also, research into reports and other articles and what other people are saying. So research, and it doesn't look one way, but it's about having a very well-informed perspective and sharing that with the world. Then thirdly, you are the right person because you are willing to practice your writing skills to craft powerful pieces. So it's about showing up. And by watching this tutorial, you're already halfway there because you're showing an interest in developing your writer's voice and turning your experiences into words that can reach many more people. Then fourthly, you are the right person because you have access to community, that's us and everybody else in the writing circle, who can help you on your journey, on your writing journey, and help with edits. And as I mentioned earlier, editing and research, it can be very collaborative in op-ed writing spaces, and it's as important as the person who is writing the story or the many people. So very, very collaborative space. And that's why, we've never chosen to write op-eds ourselves. It's always in collaboration with each other. So lastly, you are the right person because you are committed to factual writing and ethical use of other people's stories. We did mention this earlier, but it's just a very, very important point to re-emphasize that we're either going to be writing about our lived experiences based in fact and research, or we can write about other people's stories, but that has to have informed consent. We have to be very, very careful of not speaking on behalf of other people, of not using other people's lived experiences in our own agendas, and really making sure that the ethics around that are very transparent. So yeah, we're not trying to create more power dynamics in the world. We're really trying to equalize power dynamics and make sure that these stories get out to challenge the many harmful systems of injustice.
Exactly. And I think that now brings us to the close of this session, and we're just going to summarize some of the main takeaways of today's session. And so what we did today is we looked at the definition of an op-ed, and we will put these takeaways in the description as well, just so that you have that to refer back to as well in the video description. So we looked at an op-ed definition, a publicly written article distinct from journalism, providing a platform for public members, activists, organizations to express opinions, shed light on issues that might not receive mainstream attention. We looked at how op-eds are an effective way to share more in-depth information about a topic with a wide audience, and how they can build knowledge of and support for the cause or issue that you're wanting to highlight, how they stimulate public debate and form the basis for other forms of mobilizing. Importantly, that you do not need to be an expert to write one, but follow the steps required to write a good op-ed, and your article can effectively contribute to your work. We looked at some qualities of a good op-ed, which included being concise, aiming for around 750 to 800 words, having a defined topic and clear main argument, linking that topic to a specific theme, a broader theme, expressing clear opinions, targeting a specific audience, backing it, as mentioned many times, by thorough research, while being clear, well edited, and relating to the writer's expertise or lived experience. And lastly, as mentioned, to be the right person for op-ed writing, you just need to care about those relevant issues, possess well-informed perspective, be committed to honing your writing skills, have access to supportive community for assistance, and ensure ethical considerations such as factual accuracy or obtaining consent when writing about the experiences of others.
Exactly. And it wouldn't be the end of a writing circle tutorial if we didn't give you a bit of a takeaway task. And we are not giving you these tasks as just to add for no reason to your workload, or as, you know, the bad reputation of school homework, but it's really so that you can practice your skills and build on what you're learning from tutorial to tutorial. And the thing about writing is it's all in the practice. So it's not a theory-based practice. You actually have to take in all this information we've been sharing, read the op-eds we've been sharing, and then try it yourself and write on something that you care about. So the takeaway task for this second tutorial is, using what you have learned about op-ed writing, we are encouraging you to write a 700 to 800 word op-ed on a climate justice issue of your choice. And this will only be for your learning. It's not something that we are going to request for you to submit, but that's not to say that you shouldn't take it seriously. I think that this part of practice is such an incredibly important part of learning. And it's also to say that this builds on the last takeaway task from the first tutorial, which we asked you to work on the ideas that you came up with and write the key points that you wanted to include if you turned it into an op-ed. So take those ideas and those points that you crafted at the end of the last tutorial and then formulate them into a 700 to 800 word op-ed based on what you have learned in this tutorial. And that is all from us. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your attention today, and we will see you next time. And that last reminder that if you aren't already following us on social media, be sure to do so. The links are in the description. See you next time.